All right, internets, welcome to another episode of Step Up Radio. Today we have a very special guest for today's episode. He's an artist, an activist, a true revolutionary in every sense of the word. A legend in the game, internets. Please welcome the one and only Immortal Technique. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you very much, Steph-Wolf. I appreciate you guys.
Yo, so let's jump into it, man. So seeing how you're here in San Diego, I believe it's only fitting that we talk about the border.
Okay.
Earlier this year, Joe Biden effectively ended the right for asylum for many asylum seekers and proposed an immigration bill that's to the right of what Trump did in office. Biden's pivot to adopting Trumpian border policies showcases Washington's unwillingness to truly address border reform. What are your thoughts on the current situation at the border, especially since Biden is not only doing potential asylum seekers, but is also potentially giving Trump precedent even worse via executive order should he be reelected?
Biden has traditionally been to the right of Trump on several issues. He's from the Democratic faction that were to the right of several Republicans on immigration. For example, early 1990s Republicans had a different vision. Even in the 1980s, famously Ronald Reagan said, these people are Republican and they just don't know it. But he was relying on the Latin aspect of our Latino identity and not the indigenous half. But what the Latin aspect brings is the kind of machista, caudillo society that existed, which is pretty much synonymous with dictatorship. So when we look at Mr. Biden, his positions there, his position on the war in Gaza has definitely been to the right of Mr. Trump. Now, that doesn't mean that Mr. Trump's position is great. It's awful. It's just been that Mr. Biden, in comparison, doesn't have the same flexibility to present himself as being so different than his counterpart when it comes to those specific things. Now, in terms of Ukraine, in terms of other stuff that Mr. Biden is focused on, yeah, I would say that him and Trump shared stark differences on that. But when it comes to certain things like Israel, they're both committed to backing a genocide blindly. And when it comes to the border, I also think that Mr. Biden is the beneficiary of the Democratic Party's ability to do racist shit and not be held accountable for it. Right? We all know that if Mr. Trump had worsened his policies or anything, people would be on him, we'd be on him. But because he's Biden, people are using this election to be like, oh no, we can't criticize him. He's going after centrists. It's just a typical talking point to mask the person that he's always been. He's always been a center-right person. The Democratic Party follows that vein. It's always been a center-right party. I tell people all the time, and I guess it's a good segue into the next question you have, that Mr. Obama made spineless liberals who never did anything for anyone feel like they were progressives, and Mr. Trump made stupid people feel smart. And now we're stuck in the middle of those people.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then, like you pointed out, it kind of leads itself perfectly into the next question that I want to ask. Today actually marked the 250th shameful day of just genocidal attacks on the people of Gaza. Obviously, we wanted to ask about your feelings about the U.S.'s involvement supplying both monetary and just like $12.5 billion of weapons to this apartheid regime in Israel, and obviously in the face of most of the international community also condemning what's happening as a genocide. Like as an artist, but also as a person, speaking out here, like what do you have to say about the U.S.'s role in the last 250 days?
Well, I mean, the U.S.'s role has been clear throughout the entire occupation. Whether it's been a Republican or a Democratic president, that's one thing that's been resoundingly the same. We could go into specifics. I'm sure there are people that are more qualified than me to speak about that. But what I think in reference specifically to this time is that we're still living under the 9/11 effect. And what I mean by that is the 9/11 effect caused all politics to shift to the right. And what that does is enable people to use words like collateral damage when they talk about killing 15,000 children. I think what we're missing is that specifically the people at this table, we were all witnesses to this in Iraq and Afghanistan. The only difference is that social media didn't exist back then the way it does now.
Right.
You didn't have the ability. People were barely uploading songs on MySpace back in 2006, 2007. Whereas if we had the ability to upload Snapchats and TikToks and Facebook posts and Instagrams about the carnage, the mutilated bodies, the children who were born with birth defects because of the depleted uranium that was just frivolously left everywhere, all over Iraq, and specifically left by our troops because they knew it was, and now, as a matter of fact, is categorized as a weapon, as like a chemical weapon, like a biological agent that you're using against other people. So it's not that this is something new, sadly. This is them just mowing the lawn in another part of the Middle East. Yeah. They did that in Iraq. We had 1 million people dead. Out of those 1 million people, how many were children?
Right.
Yes, right? Exactly.
And in Afghanistan, 275,000 people.
Yeah.
How many of them were children? We're looking at 30,000 now, 35,000 with 15,000 dead kids. So about half the people that are dead are children. Horrific.
Yeah.
But par for the course for the United States, unfortunately. And that's why it's not that I'm shocked about it. I'm shocked that other people are shocked. I'm telling them this is what they do. And unfortunately, the other thing that I will say is that one of the biggest anti-Semitic tropes that I've encountered in my dealings with since October 7th is this idea that Israel somehow controls the United States. Like Israel has Zionists that work for the United States. But Israel has 0 bases inside the United States. The United States has 17 bases inside Israel. The United States uses Israel as a strategic nuclear strike point for all of its other targets in the region. The United States uses Israel as a pawn to try and normalize relationships with other former Nasserite Middle Eastern governments that would normally never want to do business with them. But because of its incentivizations, especially not just I would say economic ones, but tangible realities. I'll give you one example. Saudi Arabia is building 2 massive structures, one called the Line and one called the Cube. Now this is a dirty little secret, but these things are supposed to be powered by solar energy. But any system of that size that supports at least 500,000 people has to have a backup generator. And the only backup generator capable of doing that would be a nuclear generator. And the only people who are going to give Saudi a nuclear generator would be the United States, France. And why? Why do I say this? And for the people that are watching this show, they're saying, technique, what the fuck are you talking about? Well, in 1958, the United States gave Iran a nuclear generator. And I'll do you one better. During the alliance that we had with Saddam Hussein, we allowed him to use his relationship with NATO so that he could purchase a nuclear reactor from France. But I'll give you a funny story about that. The United States, when they opened up the Reagan archives, they showed that Reagan didn't really favor Saddam over the Ayatollah Khomeini. He wanted them to destroy each other so that no one would challenge America's kind of hegemonic control of the region. So when this happened, what he did was he couldn't destroy the nuclear reactor. So what did they do? The USA gave the coordinates to Israel. And Israel destroyed Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor. So all the while you're propping up Hussein, saying he's our boy, he's our guy, and yet you gave the path for Israel to do whatever they needed to do. So it's sad and disgusting that I have to say this, but the best indicator of future behavior in a person is past behavior. Yeah. And now we have to include that when we deal with America in this late republic stage that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, it's just a continuation of what has been going on. It's just we have better documentation now, and everyone has seen it. And
75 years of occupation.
Yeah.
And imagine if we had had the cameras when the Haganah and the Stern Gang and Irgun were just ethnically cleansing people and committing genocide in 1948. Those things are glazed over. And I think the thing that's happening now that I see that warms my heart is I see Christian, Muslim, and tons of Jewish people that are now coming out here and saying, no, you're not going to use my faith as a weapon to destroy other people. I won't allow that. And I don't think that's right. And me personally, I've done security for Jewish Elders for Peace and for Jewish Voices for Peace in New York City. So I love the fact that people are coming now together and saying, no, we're all against this genocide. The issue has nothing to do with religion. You know, Judaism is a beautiful religion that's 4,000 years old. Zionism is a political ideology that was born in the 1850s as a response to European anti-Semitism. Because Europeans knew who was white and who was not. They were like, no, you're not white. You're a Turkic Jewish person. Get the fuck out of our country. Again in Spain, again in England, again in Germany, again in France, right? Whereas Muslim countries were like, you're people of the book. Come stay here. You have to pay a tax, sure. Was the relationship perfect? No, but it was 100 times better than whatever existed in Europe for the entirety of the time.
We're witnessing, I think, what is the biggest anti-war movement in the U.S. probably since the Vietnam War. And I want to get your opinions on what are the thoughts on the student encampments that have been taking place in universities all across the United States? And what role do you think they play in the Palestinian liberation movement? And what do you believe that students should do in the face of this militarized police repression that we've seen from coast to coast here in the States?
First off, I want to say that every country, America, Mexico, Peru, where I'm from, when the government turns to fascism, the first thing that they do is kill the kids. The first thing that they do is desaparecido los niños de la universidad, because those are the future thinkers. Those are the people that will create everything, that will make everything in a new society, and they want those people controlled. When we say that America's being run by like 80, 90-year-old men, please don't think those old men are sitting idle. They're preparing 30 and 40-year-old people who think just like them to be the only ones that are in power. So in other words, they're laying a blueprint for that. I think that our blueprint in the academic world needs to be to show people that, one, they shouldn't be intimidated by that, but they should also learn through not just studying with, I would say, Native American activists, people from AIM, people that have been fighting these pipelines, learn how to deal with them. To give you a quick story, I went to Standing Rock one day, and some random person had a good idea. They took they took bear piss and they put it all over the ground where they knew the standoff with the agents would be. And the dogs went crazy. 2 of the dogs bit their owners. Why? Because we all know that an animal, especially a dog, got sense of smell that's like 20, 30 times better than a person.
Yeah.
If it smells a bear, it thinks there's a bear in the area. It smells a giant predator. It's like it sees a massive shit like, oh, okay, only a fucking T-Rex sized animal could have made this shit. Not no person came here and shit in this woods. So if I see a giant footprint or a giant piece of shit in the woods, I'm automatically on alert. Like, okay, something ate some shit my size and shitted it out. So I think that they should learn from those specific tactics. The other thing that they have to realize is they should absorb members from the inner city community that are in their area and learn to build that alliance. And that's been happening in New York. It's City College, less at Columbia, because I think the Ivy League shit has a little bit of classism in it. But it's not because of the kids. It's just because of the setup. The CUNY campuses are just easier to reach. They're not as closed off. So the community in Harlem came out and were there with the CUNY people, and that's why they had so much backup when that cop got hit with the water bottle or whatever, and everyone was laughing at that. But I'm telling them is because they really had an extra 200-300 people from the block that came out that were like, nah, we're not gonna let you touch these people. You know what happens? You hurt them. This block won't be peaceful. So I think that working with the local community and realizing, okay, we're part of that too. We're not some separate entity of geniuses who go to college here, and that's why we need to be treated differently. No, we're regular people. Right? And also, I gotta tell them, the worst mistake that any intelligent person can make is thinking that he's smarter than everybody else. Right? There are things that those people in the neighborhood could teach those kids: how to not be corralled in some of these scenarios, what to do when you feel like the police are pulling a flanking maneuver, how to move, how to strategize yourselves. These are great. How to have medical personnel on hand in case somebody really gets hurt. These are things that they need to learn from those people.
In a lot of ways, it almost reminds me back in Ferguson when Palestinians on Twitter were giving protesters in Ferguson tips on how to deal with tear gas and mace and how to treat wounds.
Yeah, they put a bucket over it. I was there in Ferguson. And it's funny because I met a shorty who was there with her man, and her man was a Ferguson activist. And the shorty, I was like, "Where are you from?" And she's like, "I'm from Palestine." And I was like, "Really?" She's like, yeah, I was born there, and I came out here, and she's like, "I'm just showing them like what to do, what not." And it was like a wet towel over the tear gas, wrapped it up, and then threw it back at them like a sling, like some David and Goliath shit. And I was like, "Oh, holy fuck!" So I think your point is great. Yeah, they should learn from that. I think the last thing I would tell those kids is to study the history of other movements that have taken place, not just the successful ones, but the ones that met with problematic aspects, and some of them with failure, you know what I mean? Look at the Weathermen, you know what I mean? Look at the AIM movement, look at the Black Lives Matter movement, look at the way that these movements are demonized, right? I tell people all the time, if we started out in like this rebellion against the empire and its support of its colony Israel and all these things are doing, we've gone past the New Hope stage of it, right? We would destroy the Death Star. We got some of these places to divest, but the empire's not gone. As a matter of fact, we're in the Empire Strikes Back part of this, where they're going to start doxing people, they're going to come after people. I tell individuals all the time, you can't just win a fight by swinging for 5-10 seconds. It's a long fight. Israel's not going to let you win by swinging once or twice. It'll come back, and what it'll do is very simple. It'll connect with certain black celebrities because they need to have Zionism and genocide explained to people in a folksy down south accent, right? Like that's all it takes to convince black folks when most of them know how Israelis really feel about them and feel about Africans. Next, they'll come to Latinos and they'll use the Bible and conservative Christianity to make us think, ay, tenemos que soportar a Israel. And I swear to God, I have given people the business in my community. I mean, people are like, no, pero ¿por qué no soporta a Israel? ¿Pero qué? Disculpa, señora. ¿Tú crees que Cristo estaría satisfecho con esta matanza? Usted es una desgracia, señora, y usted no cree en Cristo, usted cree en su mismo. Usted está rezando a su mismo, no a Cristo, no a Dios. Porque no hay un Dios en el mundo que puede soportar esta porquería, asesinos de niños. And the lady looked at me and she just got quiet. And everybody in the spot looked at her and was like, nosotros no soportamos eso. But they're all Dominican, right? So they're all Catholic. But I say, tell me something. ¿En qué mundo regresa Cristo? ¿En qué mundo? In what world does Christ come back? And look at this. Like, I don't have to believe in it, but I read that book enough to know what you believe in, right? Right. So, do you think on any fucking planet, any rationale, he could come back and say, well, it's because of what happened on right. That's your mind, right?
Yeah, the Jesus that was born in Bethlehem.
Right, the Jesus that was born in Bethlehem.
Some prime thoughts and words for like what's
for
going
genocide
on.
Supporters.
For exactly. And if anything, Rob was actually bringing this up when we were talking about it earlier. You did an interview with Brother Ali back in 2022, and you were describing the Middle Passage and how it's filled with a lot of pro-Palestine content on the record. Obviously, we were talking about how it's already been 9 months, basically, of just like nonstop, military assault and invasion of Gaza. Do you think that the content of those records is as relevant now as when you first started recording them? More relevant? Like, how do you feel about that?
I released one of those verses and I turned it into something else already, but there still is a lot of that content on there, and I think it's because of the nature of the album discussing freedom. And I already completed another song kind of about what's going on, but I'm not sure if I'm going to put it on the record. But I think the point I was trying to make with Revolutionary Volume 1 and 2 that a lot of people have asked me about, specifically the cover art, is Volume 1 represents the beginning of the fall of the Republic, and we're moving to an empire. And what happens when we have a revolution in this country, right? Do you think that it'll just be like I'm stunned when I watch Fox News and they think it's just going to be like a bunch of like gay liberals with M16s against an army of rednecks that are bound to win. Like, no, you're going to have the Army fight the Navy. You're going to have the Marines fight a local police force. And that's what a civil war really is. So I dressed up like a soldier and all the cops were dead. It wasn't because I'm saying, hey, I'm just gratuitous violence. No, I'm telling you, in the future, soldiers will be killing cops. And all you people that suck dick for the police department, you know what's going to have to happen? You're going to realize those people are coming for your guns, right? Those people are going to be the ones kicking your door down and telling you, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to have to arrest you for posting this about the government. So I think Volume 2 came to a different location. It's like, okay, the empire is there now, but someone hit the heads of the empire and now they're out. Whereas the middle passage kind of explains, okay, where the fuck did we get here from all this way, right? And what is the nature of genocide in general, right? Because look at it this way, the same people who will tell you there's no genocide going on in Gaza, it's just a war, will tell us there was no genocide of Native people.
Absolutely,
Right.
yes.
Oh, they just got sick. And I went on a TV show the other day, and it was like a local channel, but I remember I had to give somebody the business. And I repeat this point several times, and I have no problem saying it on this show too. If Native American people just got sick, then all the people that Stalin sent to the gulag just got cold, right? Then maybe your fucking ancestors, you anti-communist right-wing freaks, maybe your stupid fucking ancestors should have just worn a jacket. Or maybe, just maybe, I could respect the pain and suffering of those people and they could try to reciprocate my humanity.
Exactly.
So that's where I leave it there. You know what I mean? I think that we've come a long way in terms of evolving as a human race, but we're still the same people that we were 2,000 years ago. And my big fear is that one day someone's gonna go into a museum, right? And say, hey, look, this is Australopithecus, small ape human-like creature, sapien, quasi-diet, Neanderthalis. The other one with a speech gene, right? The first hominid with a speech gene, excellent creature, made wonderful. Here we have Homo sapiens sapien, violent, blood-soaked, superstitious ape. And if we're not careful, that's all we're gonna be. And I would hate for us to be remembered in a museum that way, because I think we have the capacity to be better than that. But in some ways we have to move forward, and in some ways we have to go back to the ways that indigenous and African people lived, and remember that, you know, the earth don't belong to us, we belong to the earth. And
Right.
if we don't live like that, we're not gonna be living for very long.
Yeah. There's a lot of policies and stuff that people point to as quote unquote socialism, but it's really just, you know, like indigenous ways that we, you know, use, you know, for thousands, our people use for thousands of years to survive, you know, in this part of the world.
Well, I mean, some of the things that people say are communist, I shudder because I realize that those people have no idea what communism is.
Right.
They'll call anything left of hunting the homeless for sport socialism and communism.
Right.
So to go back to your point about that, and I'll just kind of close out with this, is if I approached my indigenous ancestors, like I went back in time 2,000 years, I think it's hysterical for me to try to explain how people live now. They'll say, wait a minute, you built a guy a yurt, like a teepee, and now you want him to give you half of his kill for 10, 20 years? Why don't we just build him a fucking house? Why don't we all just help him build a house?
Okay.
And we can all hunt together and everyone can eat. What are we doing here? Why are we charging people their life savings for that? Oh, the medicine woman, you know what she didn't do? Charge you your life savings to heal you.
Right.
And she didn't even want to get paid. Just wanted to talk to your ancestors. That's it. But yet we're still going through this now. So in some ways we need to move forward, but in some ways we need to look back. And it's not that we reject modernity, it's that we're rejecting the corruption that comes with that doesn't have to come with that. It's like when people say, oh, we need to separate church and state for the benefit of the state. No, we should separate church for the benefit of the church, for the word of God, because when you combine them, then it's not a war for one's man's greed, it's a war for God. This is not, I didn't kill these people, God decided that they should die, right? And then when you open a history book, you realize, well, half the Crusades weren't even against Muslims. They were against other Christians so those countries could consolidate power in Europe, which is what's going on now, right? We had this giant war on terror. Those people still live in the same mud they did before. Where are we after that? Would you say we have more freedom after 9/11 or less? I would say much less. So all these wars were done exactly the way the Crusades were. Outer wars for the inner consolidation of power.
So obviously we're in a current moment, right, in like the United States. You pointed out there's all of this stuff happening, all of this like stupid people feeling smart, but also like young people hitting the streets. We're kind of seeing a resurgence of a word that you kind of used earlier, which is fascism, right? Fascism gets thrown around a lot these days, kind of like socialism, where people call Nancy Pelosi a socialist. Hear fascism a lot too, just kind of get thrown out there.
Right.
Can you explain, like, when you hear this term come up, like, what does fascism mean to you in the context of the United States, and why is the ruling class just so hell-bent on hurtling the country in this direction?
Well, one thing I think it's not the fault of leftists, but it is, because they chose the wrong hill to die on. Their hill to die on was the culture and gender war, when really their hill to die on should have been that the Nazis were socialists. That is the hill that we need to die on. They weren't socialists. They were part of a unique marketing strategy that marketed socialism as if it was that. But if you look at Nazi Germany in a fascist state, 3 companies basically ran Nazi Germany. They controlled the financial aspects of all that, and they were subservient to the government. So all these things that people think about, government's evil when it controls any aspect of your economic structure. Well, in a fascist society, it controls every aspect of that economic structure. It's not like you have some free market economy and then all of a sudden some kind of fascist battery gets packed into the back of the government that makes it run well. No, I think the authoritarian regime is something that people who believe they like order fantasize about, but it's such a different thing when they finally get there. It's like those Americans that are right-wing that are like, oh, I'd rather live in Russia than America. And then they get to Russia and they realize, oh, I can't make fun of Putin. No, you can't. It's not like here. Here, you can say Joe Biden is a piece of shit in front of Joe Biden. You can't tell Mohammed bin Salman that. Somebody wrote an article about him that he didn't like, and they ended up in a suitcase in an embassy somewhere. It's not like that in other countries. So we have the benefit of so many things here, but those things seem to be slipping away. And when we look at what the rise of fascism indicates, it also indicates a consistent and continuous streak of war. And I think if we want to say that the United States is a violent country, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
We've been at war with damn near every country in the world, and I think if we built our society on that, then that's the fuel that we run on. And unless we're willing to change the entire dynamic of the type of empire that we have, then that's what we're going to have. And just going back to Gaza and Israel, look at it this way. The United States, and this is for the people that watch your show, because we all know that the traitor element is everywhere. The genocide element is everywhere. They want to see what we're doing. So let's say that you support Israel and you watch this channel. See, the sad part is you've been convinced the United States can do something for you. It can't. You're just a useless colony for them. They will sell you weapons to fill their pockets, right? They'll sell you a shield, an Iron Dome, which, by the way, doesn't stop hypersonic missiles from Russia. Then it'll sell you countermeasures for the missiles and bombs that come in, but it can't stop the missiles and bombs from coming in. In other words, it'll just give you stuff that can help you defend yourself against the rockets. But there is a way, Israel, that America could stop all the rockets from coming into Israel today. They would just have to pick up the phone and call Russia and China, because ever since 9/11 and our killing of 275,000 Afghans and over 1 million Iraqis, we have no political clout in Iraq. We have no political clout in Iran. We have no political clout in Syria. We have no political clout in Lebanon, and barely holding on to Jordan. That's just because the king of Jordan's father was a CIA agent. Listen, the reality is that The only way to make missiles and bombs stop being launched at Israel is to reach out to the countries, or the country, Russia and China, who supply these nations. The United States does not wish to do that because it cannot rule the world as a triumvirate. It wants to rule the world alone. And on this mission for solo supremacy of the United States is the real reason that you're made to suffer. There you go. And oh, by the way, if you're watching this and you support Israel, your argument's not with me, your argument's with Ben-Gurion, the founder of Israel, who said himself that there had to be ethnic cleansing and we were going to have to move 700,000 people by force. So good luck with that.
Poignant words to close on, yeah.
Well, Tech, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, man. Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it. And with that said, we out.
Step Off Magazine, you already know what it is. Peace.